Developing and sustaining volunteering in your organisation. By the end of this session, you should have a better understanding of the key elements you need when you are working with volunteers. For most new groups, volunteers are essential to how you work. We're going to cover some of the basics about how to recruit, manage and retain volunteers. We have lots of resources at Community Action Norfolk to give you more detailed support about each area if you need it. So please do contact us with any queries you may have. Volunteers can add value to your organisation, support you to achieve your mission, aims and objectives, to reach more beneficiaries, raise awareness of your organisation and bring a diverse range of skills, experience and knowledge. Volunteers are not like paid staff who would come under the employment law. Therefore, you should invest time, money to recruit, train and support for your organisation to run a successful volunteer programme. We have provided a link about extra information on the bottom of this video. What underpins good volunteer management? Everyone knows good management is important, and for volunteers this is no different. It is important for your team to feel valued and supported. Having a strong framework will help with this. A good way to show your team how you value volunteers is to set clear expectations and differentiate between volunteers and paid staff is by having a volunteer policy. This policy should form the framework for your volunteer management. It can help identify benefits and challenges, clarify roles, make clear expectation. It also highlights other policies and procedures which affect a volunteer. Having a clear policy for volunteers demonstrates your commitment to good management and provides consistency, clarity and unity in the whole team's approach. Your approach to volunteers, you should think about their whole journey, from how you identify roles and recruitment to how you manage and retain them. You should also think about how you will manage the end of the volunteer's journey. Creating a volunteer policy. Your volunteer policy helps people to look at the benefits and challenges which come with working with volunteers, clarifies their roles within the organisation and states what volunteers can expect from the host organisation. It draws together the various policies and procedures which affect volunteers, their recruitment, expenses and health and safety. To start putting your policy together, think about these key points. Why do you need volunteers? As we have already noted, you cannot use volunteers as unpaid staff, so you need to think carefully about why you are going to work with them. How do they fit into your organisation? Maybe you already have a team. What would volunteers bring? What roles would they be carrying out, and how do these fit in? What do you need to include? We are going to make some suggestions about what to include, but what information do you think is vital for them to know about what you do and how you work? And lastly, engage your team. Your team might have some very strong feelings about the sorts of information your volunteers might need. They might have ideas for roles they could take or how the role fits in with the team. Good volunteer management only works if the whole team supports it, so getting the team involved from the start can be really helpful. Once your policy is in place, it will then give you the basis to effectively manage your volunteers. There is no set format for volunteer policies. Each organisation has its own unique needs that should be reflected in its policy. For example, an organisation that works with volunteers befriending people with learning difficulties is going to have a different policy to that of one carrying out conservation work. Most organisations prefer to have a short volunteer policy that refers to other separate documents, covering health and safety, for example. This is probably the best option, as a long document can be very overwhelming. Try viewing the policy as a statement of intent, with the day-to-day nuts and bolts covered in separate policies or in a volunteer handbook. There may be no blueprint for the perfect policy, but these areas listed are all the things you should think about including. Once you've got your policy in place, you need to think about how you will recruit volunteers. Prepare. Make sure you have everything in place: policies, application forms, handbooks, and what is your process. Equality and diversity. Open to all. Be prepared to make arrangements to assess and accommodate for people that may require additional needs. Promote the fact you embrace diversity. Where to find volunteers. Explore all different options. These may vary according to the demographic. Radio, local paper, and social media could be a really useful combination. Be ready to take information to where your potential volunteers are, because they might not find out about your opportunities otherwise. We've shared a training video on the basics of social media on this webpage if you need some support to get started. Role descriptions. Have these ready so the volunteer understands their role, boundaries, and who to report to. Think about the role title. Is it enticing? The recruitment process. How do they apply? Registration form, references, an interview or a conversation? And then is there an induction and a review? Children and young people. Child protection is assumed for those under 16. We've put a link to Voluntary Norfolk's volunteering portal and the national database for volunteering on the webpage. Training volunteers can help them to feel more confident in their role, which will allow them to enjoy volunteering with you and stay involved. Training can also help volunteers to develop their skill sets in other areas, which not only shows them that you value their contribution, but can also help them to find new ways of supporting you. Key things to think about. Induction, in person or online? Will you include a handbook or a visit to the place of work if appropriate? Should include orientation, introductions, review of the role, values, policies and procedures. Risk management. You must assess any associated to your volunteers or anyone affected by your activities. A written risk assessment should be created. Appropriate training, supervision, and any necessary safety equipment must be provided. Effective and appropriate training. Training is different to different people. It doesn't have to be as formal. Ongoing support and supervision may be just as useful. It must be appropriate for the role, and you must bear in mind a volunteer's availability. Providing opportunities and managing risks. It is important to strike the appropriate balance. Volunteering as a route to work. Volunteers who want to enhance their CVs may be keen to do so as much training as they can. Make sure they are not foregoing their volunteering role for training opportunities. Training doesn't have to be hard work. You can join up with other organisations or use things like the Volunteer Passport to help give your volunteers a good grounding. Managing and retaining volunteers. Good management is the best way to help keep your volunteers. Key points to think about. Volunteers, not employees. Very important to ensure that a volunteering role is not considered in the eyes of the law as employment due to employment law, tax law, regarding those people in receipt of benefits, immigration laws and copyright law. Keep boundaries between staff and volunteers whilst ensuring each are equally valued. Volunteering roles should be an expectation rather than an obligation. Supervising and supporting. Communication is key. It is important to really get to know your volunteers. This means taking time to understand what they find satisfying about volunteering and any concerns they may have about the role or the organisation. Feedback is key. Understanding your volunteers will help you to revise roles to ensure they are still relevant and valuable, provide new opportunities for keeping volunteers involved and motivated, enable you to continually improve how volunteers are organised. Part of the role of supporting volunteers involves managing difficult situations. These can be addressed effectively by having robust policies in place that you can refer to when necessary. The volunteer policy. As discussed previously, this is your framework for managing your volunteers effectively. It will allow you to have structure and impartiality. The volunteer coordinator. A key person with the role of being a point of contact to the volunteers and help manage their activity. They are central to an organisation's success in recruiting and retaining the volunteers needed to deliver its objectives. Coordinators are in addition to leading volunteers who have an ability to communicate the vision of the organisation and the part volunteers play. They will also have an understanding of what motivates them and how to get the best from them, helping them move into new roles as their needs and the needs of the organisation changes. They should work together with the coordinators to be effective. Recognition and reward. Informally, telling volunteers they are doing a great job, asking for feedback on developments, getting them involved with the social aspects of the group are all important. More formal opportunities, such as awarding of certificates, accreditation, and even inviting volunteers to be part of working groups that can shape the direction of the organisation and make them feel a valued member of the team. Use Volunteers Week as an opportunity to engage with your volunteers and advertise the good work that is being done. And retaining your volunteers. Once you have recruited your volunteer, you want to make sure they stay with you. So as part of your supervision, consider speaking to them about their role. Are you interesting and varied? Is there any scope to develop their role to allow them to practice an exciting skill or learn something new? Get them to meet new people, address a particular need, gain more confidence, or to try out a new role before committing to a new career. Should they decide to leave, it's a good idea to have an exit interview to establish if there had been any problems that weren't addressed, or how they feel the service is shaped and ways in which it can improve. Thank you for watching. I hope you now have a better understanding of developing and sustaining volunteering in your organisation.